Hello, my name's Fernando, and I like to write on a blog I call All About Turbo. I usually write about turbo machinery, which is what I do for a living, but every now and then I'll share something I find interesting from an engineer's perspective. And a few months ago, I shared about the star that sits on top of the San Jacinto Monument outside of Houston, Texas. And I'd been there. I saw this print architectural drawing of the star on top of the monument, and it just blew me away about how elegant it seemed to me from an engineering and a drawing perspective. So I was obsessing over it. I'd figured I would extract the points of each vertex or point for each one of these features because I wanted to model this in 3D. So first I thought I would work with cylindrical coordinates, and this morning just practicing about how I would do this, I realized I'm just going to work with Cartesian coordinates, rectangular coordinates, x, y, z. So I have my points here now, and I have point A, B, C, D, E, and then each one of those relates to each one of these points in this drawing. Point A, I know it's a little blurry, but I've spent hours looking at this. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then K. They skipped the I because it looked a lot like a number one, and that would have been confusing. So I thought that was pretty genius. So this presented a challenge because usually when I model in 3D, I've used a more traditional method of subtractive or additive sort of modeling, where you maybe uh, draw a block and then you'll drill holes through the block, or you'll start extruding planes and surfaces off of those objects that you create. Here, this structure is a star, basically a lot of intersecting planes that then define these lines and these points. So I took a different approach. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to model each one of the points that I figured out their coordinates for. I'm going to connect them with lines. I'm going to have all this set of triangles that you see here. I'm going to create what Fusion 360 calls patches, and then I'm going to stitch them together. And then I'll be able to array that into the four sections, and then I'll end up with the model of the star. So I'll show you what that looks like in real life. So this is Fusion 360. I love Autodesk products. I've been using them my whole life. I think Fusion 360 for an enthusiast or a DIYer, it's an incredible tool. I'll go and I'll start a sketch. I'll pick the bottom plane and just make sure that where it says 3D sketch, you have that enabled. Oh, because when you pick a sketch, you pick a reference plane and then you draw things on that plane. Imagine like you're working on a sheet of paper on your desk. But the fact that I'm sort of saying I want to be allowed to do a 3D sketch will actually let me place things off of that sheet of paper off the desk. And that's what I need to do today. So I'll start by drawing a point. There's all of these useful things show up when you type in commands or pick commands. I'm going to draw a point and I'm going to anchor it at the origin of this coordinate system. So there should be a point there and I can see it. Now, since I placed that point right on top of the origin, it automatically assigned a constraint. You can see this little symbol here. That means that that point is locked in there. But I want to move that point around as I copy it, so I'm going to delete that constraint. So now this point can move. Okay, now I want it to be at origin because this is how my next steps are going to go from here. I double click on that point and it opens this transformation window. I'm going to make copies of this point. So I'm going to say create copy, and here it's very convenient. I can start typing in my X, Y's, and C's. So I'll start typing the first point, point A, and that's at an elevation of 0. So this point is at 45 degrees, so it has two components. So I click enter and I zoom out and I see that first point. You see it right there at perfect 45 degree. Now I double click on that point again, the original point. If somebody knows a better way to do this, I would love to know about it. But anyhow, this is what I figured would be the most robust way for me to do this without screwing it up. So I'm going to do the second point, point B. It's 167.999. It has a y component. Point B, there's 2 point B's at either side of point A, and they're at these weird angles, 36 degrees, 53 degrees. So these are the only points that are not perfectly either on a 90 degree or on a 45 degree. So I have 2 components, 122.957, maybe obsessing over with 3 significant digits, considering this is an architectural drawing, but since I can, why not? Place the second point right there. Now I'm going to do the second point B. And at this point, I will probably just sort of go into time-lapse mode so that you don't have to be bored. 72. Now here on my table, point C, I need to draw 2 point C's because I have one at 0 degrees and technically I have one at 90 degrees. I didn't duplicate those coordinates here because I can easily just infer and know that when I'm going to define my second point at level, let's call it C, which is 72 inches, I would immediately be able to just say, okay, that is y component 102 inches at 72 inches high. So you can see the points are starting to populate. Copy 141. 141. This was level 117. 141. 117. Sort of have a 3D mouse or 3D input device because I like to work with 2 hands here. So you can start to see how these points are starting to show up in 3D space. Okay, let's add. I've made it up this far. Now I've got point E. Point E, it's at 45 degrees. It's 107, 436, 107, 436 at 162 inches. I was not going to make a copy of it. Perfect. Make a copy. 156, 234. 156, 234. Okay. One oh seven, 074. Okay, so that is the last point. That is the tip of the star. That's point K, or the highest point at the monument. So if we look here in 3D, you see that these points are just floating out there. Now, this is a trick. Once you start connecting these, it'll be really difficult to figure out which point is which. So I figured I would add a little text label next to each one of them. So I use the text tool. I click on the plane where I want to sort of project the letter I want drawn and make sure it's a nice, this drawing, this star is 540 inches tall. So make sure that whatever text you're entering, I chose 10 inches so that I could actually see it. Otherwise you're going to get a little tiny letter. Okay, so that's A. A nice thing about all these Autodesk products has always been that you could type in commands. So if you want to search for a command, you type S, and then you type T, and automatically it populates all of the commands that have a T in them, and I pick text. And I don't have to necessarily be traveling all the way to where this text input exists. So that way you can work a lot faster. So I got B, and then each point was at a different level. So if I look sideways, I know that these are my two C points. So I pick text. C. C. Now I got D. D, I got E, and then I have F. I have 2 points F. I want to draw next to that point, F. And then there's another F. The next level is G. The next level is H. The first time I did this, it took a lot longer. This is sort of like a speed run after having practiced. Okay. So now we have all these points that match each one of the points from these features with the same letters. So let's keep. Now I don't need my trusty Excel sheet anymore. Let's just fill the screen with that. Now that we have the points, I can start connecting the dots, and I'm going to use the line command. You can press L, summon the line command, and you pick begin or an end point, and then I'm going to keep making references to my drawing here. I can see A, B, I just connected those, and then B goes to C, and B is going to go to D, and B is going to go to F. So let's sort of follow first the most obvious pattern, I would say, for instance, in this cross section is the darkest or the thickest line, which is this perfect cross section or slice of this design. So we're going to go from B to C. I didn't want to draw that line there. So from B, did I pick B? Nope. Line from B to C. Remember, there's two sides, so I go from B to C, and then from C to D, from D to F. So L from C to D, and then from D, let's make sure we pick the point, from D to F, and then from F to K. From F to K. Okay, now we do the other side. From C to D, from D to F, F to K. So when you look at this way, it looks a lot similar to that. Yes. Perfect. All right. Now the other connections. I have F being sort of like a central point, being one of the arms of the star here. I have a lot of points connected to F. So I have G. G is one of the arms. I'm sorry. So E, F, and H go to G. So E to G, F to G, F to G, H is another. Oops. You have to make sure you pick the correct anchor point. Okay. At this point, it's almost like you're playing connect the dots, but it's not a random connection. There's an order that you have to respect, or you'll end up with the wrong faces. Okay, so here, D goes to B, D goes to B, D goes to B. And now here is where you will notice that there's these naturally sort of appearing triangles on this design. And this is the only thing I would think, I don't want to call it a flaw, but when you look at this leg, the point A, B, B, F, F, E, there are 4 points. It's a trapezoid, not a triangle. It's the only feature in this drawing that is showing up with 4 points. Now, based on geometry fundamental principles, you need 3 points to define a plane. And if you add a fourth point, you start getting in trouble because that fourth point, unless it's on that same plane, it's going to be off the plane. And that's what happens here. So I'm going to have to make an executive decision. I'd love to have been able to talk to the guy that drew this the very first time, but since I can't, I'm going to have to, I decided I was going to first, complete the connections that are marked clearly. And it's nice because once you start connecting these points with these lines, Fusion 360 automatically recognizes them as surfaces and it's starting to shade them blue. But here is where I have to then say F. I have this, you see, this is A, B, F, E, and it's not closing because it is not behaving like a surface because these 4 points are not coplanar. They're not in the same plane. So I'm going to make an executive decision, like I said here, and I'm going to basically slice this into the triangle. And I keep missing the connections. I'm sorry about that. It's because I added those letters there to help me identify the points. But I'm going to define that surface there into triangles. And then I need to close the back, the sort of the hidden structure underneath this star. So same thing here. I'm going to, I'm going to have to sort of decide, how do I want to resolve this? I'm going to make these triangles so that then I can have a bottom surface. And then the back is completely open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a point and I'm going to put it at the same level where C is, because that's what I'm going to say it's the bottom of this. So C was 72 inches off of the bottom. I'm going to put it at X0, Y0. I'm going to say 72. And I am going to connect these features here. And now you see how everything sort of has a little shade. It's because now all of these features are well defined. You will notice that this last one, this last big surface, has more than 3 points, and was able to sort of resolve easily. It's because they were all perfectly in that plane at 0 degrees, and so are the other ones at 90 degrees. So now that I have it here, I'm going to go to the surface side of modeling. I'm going to say patch, and I'm going to say that I want that to be a patch. Every time you make you issue a command in Fusion 360, it sort of consumes that sketch that had that command in there. So if that happens, just go back to your sketch tree here and just force the sketch to be visible. I'm going to say OK. And you see every time I'm picking one of these patches, it sort of promotes it into, it makes it darker shade because it's an actual, like, almost imagine like it's an actual sheet. If you select the lines, you gotta click escape to unselect them. There. There. Come to the other side. If it's transparent, it hasn't been defined yet. Almost done. I picked the line. Okay, 3 more to go. 3, 2, 1. If I hide my sketch now, look at that. It looks like a nice, shiny. Now I go back to solid, and I'm going to say, I'm sorry, let me go back to surface. I have to say stitch. And I'm going to pick all of them, and I'm going to say, sure, yep, stitch them together. And now, if I go to solid, and I do a circular array, I can pick it. I just have to click once because the whole thing is a solid. I pick the axis of rotation, and I say, I need 4 of these things. And look at that. That is the San Jacinto star in my computer. Look at that. It's pure awesomeness. So finally, I've done it. Thanks.